So we're going to go through this research question and operationalize it. So make sure first you understand what the independent variables are. Substance abuse is independent. What type of association? We're looking at an increase. We're looking at a dependent variable of depression, and your population is online students. So let's examine depression as we go through some examples. So one of the rules we just mentioned in the previous video was that we have to turn a variable into observable terms. Anytime you hear the word observe, make sure that you go back to the basic concept of your five senses. Can I really say this person is depressed because they're sad, or can I say they're depressed because they checked a box saying they're sad? I can see that. I can see them sleeping. I can hear them telling me they're sad. I can't get inside a person's head and figure it out. So it's important to figure out exactly what are you going to collect. Is it going to be an observation? Is it going to be something that somebody checks off and therefore they're saying that? You have to see it, hear it, in order for it to be considered observable. So make sure you break down first that variable. What do you see? What do you hear? That's your first thought process when you're operationalizing. The second is then you have to get a specific, precise procedure. So for example, if I'm measuring depression, how do I measure that? If I know it has to do with people that sleep a lot and they cry and they feel sad, am I going to sit there and count how many hours they sleep? Am I going to ask them to tell me how many hours they slept? Or am I going to ask them to tell me to what extent they feel sad? So for example, am I going to tell them pick 0 to 3 and tell me the level of sadness you have? And then maybe I ask that same question for sleep patterns, for changes in appetite, and then I add it together. So you have to be very precise. You have to say, I'm going to sit here and do this. I'm going to have them fill out a survey, and the survey is going to have questions that are designed in this manner. So this is your precise procedure. You also have to identify how that information is going to be collected. So is this going to be a survey? Is it going to be online? How does it get emailed? How do you know who to email it to? Is it a pen and paper? How do you give them that pen and paper? Is it in a sealed envelope? Does it include their name on it? Who's giving it to them? So you actually have to be that explicit, that incredibly specific when you're operationalizing. You have to understand as well, what does that really mean? So if somebody sleeps a lot and they have changes in appetite, does it really represent depression? But how would you distinguish that, for example, from a typical teenager that may just be going through some hormonal changes in puberty? Is that depression, even if they have the same symptoms? So how do you distinguish depression, say, from just puberty? And how do you distinguish, is there different degrees of depression? So if I come up with this scale where I'm asking people to rate it from 0 to 3, does a certain score mean that they're depressed versus not depressed? Or is there such a thing as a little bit of depression and a lot of depression? Those are the things that you have to figure out too when you're operationalizing it. So in this question, let's look now at substance abuse. So let's operationalizing it using the same rules we just went through. Let's say that I wanted to find out if somebody has a substance abuse problem. I might ask them, how many drinks did you have the last time you partied, in the last week, during the last weekend, right? So I could ask them to come up with a response for each of these. What are the weekend's questions can you think of? And if I gave a number to each question, so if the last time you partied, if that person says 5 drinks in the last week, if I start adding these up, for example, then I could come up with a scale. Or I might say anybody that has 3 or more drinks in a given at a party is considered to have a substance abuse problem. That's 1 point. And the last week, if they drank 10 or more, that's 1 point. So you can figure out the different ways, but you see that you start having to come up with very specific questions, and then you're going to have to think through. Are you just asking them that? Are you having them fill out a survey? How do you figure that out? So think through some questions that you would ask if you wanted to really operationalize substance abuse. So remember then, as a recap, to operationalize a variable, it's 4 steps. You figure out exactly what you're going to ask, how you're going to ask it, what options people have, and you give those options some kind of numbers and quantitative research at least, so that you really capture those responses. The reality, though, is that there are always going to be problems with it. This is not a perfect process. So you may not know in advance what the important issues are. What if you're asking college students, but you don't ask anything about prescription medication during finals? Do people that take prescription medication like Adderall or Ritalin to study, is that considered substance abuse? Maybe I don't even know about it, so I don't even know to ask about it. What if I just don't really understand the issue? So maybe if I'm asking people whether they're depressed, but if denying you're depressed is a symptom of being depressed, is that really going to capture the issue? Are people just going to tell me, no, I don't feel depressed? And again, it's all going to be superficial. There's no true way to perfectly capture a concept. Again, if you ask people that use drugs, are you really catching those that use substances? Can you really tell the difference between somebody that, again, is somebody going to just lie and say, I don't have any drinks, I don't do that? So it's superficial and there's no true way to perfectly capture a concept. But the best you have, the best compromise you can get and still capture good data is what you do when you operationalize.